guys, welcome back to Friendly Ties. Today we are going to be searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. We're going to be talking about Seti. So, Seti. Actually, not Seti. Or we'll get to Seti in a minute. Before that, it is the time of year where nominations for the Golden Geek Awards are open on Board Game Geek. And I know that last year we got nominated, thus achieving all of my dreams and goals. But, why not do it again? Also, this is kind of becoming an annual tradition. It's kind of a thing. If you feel so inclined, there is a link in the description. You can nominate all sorts of things. Don't feel any pressure to nominate us. Nominate whoever you listen to. Nominate whatever games you like this year. It's a really fun thing that Board Game Geek does every year. And so this is your annual reminder that nominations are open. And I believe that they close this Sunday, April 13th. And we will get back to our regularly scheduled programming in 3, 2, 1 more thing. So there is a point in this episode where we do a little bit of spoiling on, actually by a little bit, I mean a lot of bit of spoiling on the aliens in Seti. It's not until later in the episode. There is a time code in the description, thank you Jonathan, where you can see when it starts and when it stops. We also give you a warning in the episode. And now we will actually go back to Seti.
It's a big one.
Man, this game, it has been banging around in our brains for a couple of months now as we have been playing this one a bunch, talking about it a bunch, and finally we have found the perfect amount of time to be able to play it.
The planets have aligned for us to record this episode. Yeah, it came out at Essen last October. The designer is Tomas Holek, and they designed 3 games that came out at Essen last year. I got to be honest, I heard about it, and I was like, that looks cool, looks really heavy, lots of icons. Maybe I'll get to it. But then Czech Games Edition sent me a press copy, which I am incredibly thankful for. And I was like, well, now that I have it, I guess I should play it. And that started a whole lot. I played it once, then I taught it to you, Anastasia, I've played like 8 times. You like 12 and 6 or 7. Like, we've got a lot of plays under our belt. Of this game that takes like 3 hours. We just played it. And even after we played it so many times, it was like 2 hours and 50 minutes, I guess.
Yeah. It feels like there's no getting away from how long it is. I think this is something I was going to bring up later, but since we're on it now, like, to me, it's the biggest problem with the game. It is so long. there's no way avoiding it.
Watch out.
It's
We're
worth
going to get
it.
some comments. They're going to say, like they did on Endeavor.
So yeah, sure. They're like, oh, you could do it faster.
Yeah, you
Whatever.
could do it in 90 minutes. Okay, well, you know what, guys? We can't do it in 90 minutes. Apparently, we can't play games as fast as the rest of you.
Yeah, it's got a lot going on, which makes sense. I made the joke about the planets aligning. This is probably the number one mechanical thing that people first see. Like, you got a pretty big board in the middle of the table, lots of icons, etc. But then there's a solar system, like a literal, not a literal sun, but a plastic piece that sticks out in the middle, and then you have rings that go around it, 3 different layers, and you move them with your finger, and it's incredibly satisfying to do this. And also, it does a relatively decent job of abstracting the idea of the inner planets orbit the sun faster than the middle and the outer planets. And you send probes and they kind of wander along. It's kind of a spatial puzzle. But then this is a hand management game, right? Like, you have this gigantic deck of cards, like it seems like most heavy Euro games have these days, and you can spend money to play cards down, and they do stuff. They're multi-use. Every card can be used in 4 different ways, which is cool. And
Wild.
And then there's also essentially 3 resources in the game. The money for the cards. There's energy that you can use to move the probes around the solar system. Generally, you spend energy to do that. And then the last resource is publicity, which is kind of funny. It's on a track on the middle of the board, and you spend this to get technology, which you slot into your board. Everybody's got a little console, and you slot the technology in, and it modifies things, makes things cheaper, makes things better, makes things more efficient, etc. And realistically, as you're doing all these things, you are interacting with the 3 systems. Essentially, one is landing on planets to find yellow alien data. You are scanning faraway stars to get pink yes, pink alien traces, like a trace of that there might be an alien out there, and then you get this data from a bunch of ways, and you send it into your computer and crunch it, and then the algorithm gives you some like, we found some stuff inside the code or whatever for a blue alien trace, and you the pink, the yellow, and the blue, these come together, they find aliens, and then it should be like the successful search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or the found of extraterrestrial
Parentheses,
intelligence.
it works this time.
Yeah, it works every time. Like,
yeah, every time. You're
SETI is known
guaranteed
for
to find
slam
proof.
dunking, finding aliens. Yes.
Yeah, it does have a very positive, an optimistic view of that that search for beyond.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great. It mostly takes place in the solar system. You're not like really it's more like you're like interacting with aliens in that you're like studying them. It's not like they show up and fight you or you're scared of them or anything like that. And mechanically, the way this works is when you kind of reveal this alien, it's like, okay, this game, there's this little like subsystem that has like these rules. The rules are pretty short for each of them, at least in comparison to the rest of the rules of the game anyway. So the extra hurdle is not all that much. But and it's, I think it's a good and a bad thing. Like it's good in that it's like not a huge lift for what happens when you have a new alien. I thought when I first played the game that these were going to be like much wackier. But with the exception of one of the aliens, I would say they mostly all have the same sort of, if you interact with me, we pay you good points, especially if you do it earlier. It's very much like a race to interact with them as quickly as possible. And then also they give you special cards that are more powerful than the cards in the normal deck because it is a hand management game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is a sign of good design with this game, that the aliens aren't too wacky, because since they do come out in the middle of a 3-hour game.
Yeah, no, like literally in the middle. If that wasn't clear, like pause, let's figure out what this alien is.
Yeah, usually one is revealed like 2 rounds into the 5-round game, and then the other one's usually revealed about 3 rounds into the 5-round game. And yeah, if they were really wacky, I could totally see situations where you're like an hour and a half in, and you flip over an alien, and you're like, well, I lost because the wrong alien flipped because I haven't been working towards that strategy. None of them really have that, which is good.
No.
But also it means they can't be too crazy to stay within those bounds.
Well, what's really fun about it too is, for a game that is ostensibly designed around the concept of, discovering extraterrestrial intelligence, for these aliens to come out and twist the game just enough that I feel like if you feel like maybe you're a little behind or otherwise, the aliens come out and they kind of freshen things up and they give you an opportunity to do something new or different or whatever, just they complement what's already happening in the game really nicely. But what they also do is just add so much variability to this game. Even if once you've played it a bunch and you've seen all the different aliens, every game is going to be shifted ever so subtly or ever so dramatically, depending on how much you interact with them, one way or another, because of these aliens. And I think that is really, really cool to have happen in every single game.
Yeah.
And the game pays you pretty handsomely for interacting with the aliens. It is kind of right like on the box, like what it is that you're supposed to be doing. But the game also rewards you essentially just for exploring the solar system. And so getting further out there and going to like Uranus and Neptune and like getting extra data from those locations is going to be actually a huge chunk of points as well. And so it's sort of interesting. There is, I would say, like 2 primary focuses, which is the aliens, the far away component, and then the sort of more localized component in the system. And both really matter in the game. I think I could see folks kind of like with Lost Ruins of Arnak being like, I want to play like just a monster hunting strategy or whatever. And I think that SETI is just like Lost Ruins of Arnak, that it's like, that's not a thing. What you actually have to do is interact with all the systems in this game. Like,
yeah, some more than others, but yeah.
Yeah.
In each play.
I mean, I think it's wide enough that you can go kind of deeper in different directions. But for me, this reminds me the most of Arc Nova, just in terms of that fat deck that you have, the variability and interacting with your cards and how it plays out. And yet the games are incredibly different. They do very different things. This is not a this versus that. It's just for the depth and the breadth.
The brain space feels adjacent.
Brain space. Like we were saying, like it's worth it to sit down and play however long it takes. You're like, oh man, that was a really satisfying thing that I did there. But I don't know why I feel like this game is somehow both incredibly complicated and incredibly simple at the same time. That makes no sense.
This has been on
it-
the quicker side to teach. I've taught this game many times now, and I know you have as well, Anastasia. This looks like a game that'll be a 60-minute teach, and I've done it in 30 minutes many times, which I think is not bad for a 3-hour Euro.
I think a big part of that is that the actions you take tend to be they're pretty clean, right? It's like play a card, and then it's, when you make a probe, it just goes into play. If you're moving on your turn, moving is like very intuitive, right? Like you just kind of are going from space to space. If you are exploring, it's just like claim these discs and put your stuff there. The complexity comes in that like there are enough options and you're tight enough on resources,
super tight,
that choosing to do this means you can't do that. You want to try to accomplish like a certain goal this turn. The solar system might rotate, which might facilitate or harm where you're trying to head. So you kind of like need to try to get ahead of it. So planning around the timing of everything and syncing it all together is the part that ends up making it very brain melty. But the actual actions themselves are very easy to explain.
Yeah, teaching this game, I always start with the first action is launch a probe. And on your turn, you do one main action and then as many free actions as you want, which is not as bad as it might sound. But the first main action is launch a probe, spend 2 money, put a probe on Earth. Done.
Done. Or play a card.
Boom.
Play card. Pay money, play card, right?
Do what it says. The icons, they're pretty straightforward. And but how you piece it all together. I will say, for me, like I've had a bit of a pet peeve for years about heavy Euros where it's like, and also free actions, where just how that can like really spiral out and make turns go really long. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. There could be long turns. There could be absolute analysis paralysis on Seti, but it's not the free actions that are the thing that make that happen. And I've seen that happen in other games. Like the free actions are super intuitive. Like generally, spend energy to move, or like do a 2-to-1 conversion to save your butt because you desperately need that one more money. That sort of thing.
Yeah. No, but I think, Nick, you hit on it perfectly, that the crunching is, and not so dissimilar to the game we talked about in our last episode, Endeavor Deep Sea. Like this is definitely a game where, you can look at things and be like, okay, I could do this and then this and then this, but maybe I should do this and then this and then this. And I really need to do that first so that I get the publicity from that. And then that publicity is going to give me the tech, and then that tech's going to give me the data. Like, you only do one thing on your turn, right? So you have to break that up and then kind of, I almost look at it as a programming game sometimes, because I'm just like, cool, how am I going to execute what I need to do and in what order? And like,
and then somebody spins the solar system and you swear very loudly.
I find more often than not what happens is I want someone to spin the solar system.
And
I'm
they're
like
just not
ready
doing
for
it.
the slingshot, and they're not doing it just yet. I'm like, you have so much publicity, spend
Come on,
it, please.
do it.
And inevitably, you're like, fine, I'll spend the extra energy to move the extra time. And then immediately after that, they're like, I'm going to spin the solar system. And it's just like, oh, gosh.
Which can mean for a game that has that much crunching of your plan and strategy, the solar system is really the tactical part of the game. It's also the most interactive part of the game. It's the thing that changes kind of everything. And so, like a lot of games at 2 players, you're going to have a little bit more control over that and a little bit better expectations of that. At 3 and 4, it's going to, progressively become less and less. And so even as we sat down tonight, I've been playing this a bunch, 2-player, we sat down, the 3 of us were playing, and I was like, oh my God, the solar system is moving so much. Stop. But like, just because I've been used to playing it, where I could kind of predict it a little bit more. But it also means that things move around and change a lot faster too, so can interact with other elements of the board more widely. So this whole game is so clever, especially for this designer who I had not heard of until this year. So
I will say about the solar system moving, it is a bit of a tripping point for especially newer players. Like that's probably like maybe the hardest part of the entire game to teach. In some ways, it feels very intuitive if you think about it from like orbital dynamics or whatnot. Like the solar system moves and your probe moves, but like every time I played it, people think, okay, well, Mars is going to move here, and then like my probe will be on Mars. It's like, no, your probe is moving just like Mars. They're all orbiting around, and also they're 3 different layers of tiles, and they're funky shapes. And I think every one of us and everyone I've taught this to at least once has seen, like, we go to move the solar system and we're like, wait, it's doing what now?
Yeah. What's
I
gonna
really
happen?
thought that was going to move my probe, or I really thought my probe was safe, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It just takes a minute, I think, to kind of internalize. Like once you make that mistake once, generally you kind of you think twice about it in the future.
Yeah, it's certainly the most novel mechanism in the game,
yeah.
and I think it's really cool. I feel really intelligent when I use it to accelerate my moves in the direction I want to go, or when I line up a really clear, easy shot to Neptune. That's definitely the most satisfying moments in the game. But there's a part of it that I also find a little bit odd, which is that when the rings rotate, it might sort of reveal an asteroid underneath, which is generally bad for the player, or a comet underneath, which is good for the players. And you won't necessarily know that it's coming. And there's no way, the game does not have like a sort of arrow that's like, the next thing that's coming is an asteroid. Like, it does not give you these warnings. And
it's space. You don't know what's coming in space.
Yeah. it's thematically appropriate, and it is kind of cool. I think the only thing that I grapple with in it is that it's a pretty heavy Euro game with a lot of really precise counting, and one resource matters a lot. And so like it's spinning into a moment where like you suddenly can't move off of it because of asteroids feels really painful. And essentially for me, what it's put me into in the game is like, I don't gamble on the blank spaces unless I like absolutely 100% have to. And because there isn't,
it's blank right now. Get across. Yeah.
The penalty
Yeah,
of like being
can't stay in
wrong
open
about
space.
it is just so bad.
And technically, you could
100%.
memorize where those things are. It kind of reminds me of Kutna
Could
Ora
you?
from last
I
year.
guess you could, yeah.
Yeah, because it's just printed on the board and printed on the tiles. But, you know, I've played this game 8 times, and there have been a couple times where I'm just like, I got a sneaking suspicion there's an asteroid the next time this moves. I'm going to go over there, and then an asteroid's revealed, and it's like, was that because I remembered, or is it just, you know, superstition? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things too, like the first couple of times you play, I think it really behooves you to just be really chill about the movement of the planets and moving your probe and all of that. It's really easy to forget to move your probe, and it's also one of those things that can kind of drag down the game to be like, oh, wait a second, like let me see if I need to move my probe because you might do this and you might do that. It's like, I think if you're playing this for the first time, I would just crunch that. I'll take my turn. It's chill, like, you know, so it's just something to consider.
I'd like to talk a little bit about something that Nick just kind of glancingly mentioned, and that is like the precise nature of the planning and spending of your resources. Like, you know, it's a big heavy Euro, but there's, like I said, like 3-ish resources. It's closer. It feels closer to 2. Like publicity, you spend it primarily to get technologies cool. It's the money and the energy. And yeah, since you only do one main action a turn, you definitely, like you said, programming, plan all these things out. But you could also have those situations where you plan everything out, and then you get to the end and you realize you are 1 energy short, or the solar system moved and now you're on an asteroid, so you're 1 energy short. And on the one hand, I love that small amount of resources is important. Like, you know, you can get income throughout the game, and you kind of get income at the start of every round. And like, if you get income of like $6, you're like, that feel like you're like, I'm getting rich. I'm getting rich right now. And you look across the table and somebody got $7, and you're like, are you freaking kidding? How 7? And then when you compare it to like Ark Nova, where it's like, I have $58, you know, and the math, like, right, you're like, I got to play this animal, and it's 17, and that, oh, but I get a discount, and that one, you're doing all this floating math. In Seti, it's like, this card costs 3 money. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, that is a king's ransom. Am I going to play this 3 money card? But the free action, the 2-to-1, is like the savior of this game. It's like such a subtle little thing that's easily forgotten. But you can throw away 2 cards to get a resource, or 2 money to get a card or an energy, or 2 energy to get a card or a money. And so when you look at all these things as a resource, including this big hand of cards you have, which are multi-use, frequently it seems like you can get there, but then that brings in the AP, where you're like, okay, I have to ditch 2 cards to get the money that I need. Well, which of the cards do I get rid of? It's got pros and cons. It's got pros and cons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's other avenues where you can get these resources from. If I do the technology that allows me to use my data to get this stuff, you know, it can really compound on itself in terms of like, I really need these things. I'll say again, from like just a design perspective, I'm pretty blown away at how the designer has managed to balance this game using 1s and 2s and 3s, whereas your games like Terraforming Mars and your Ark Nova is like, they rely on the fact that things cost somewhere between 5 and 25. Now, admittedly, one difference in this game from like any of those other deck kind of games is that the cards in this game are not like your payoffs, right? Like in Arc Nova, you are working towards playing this animal. It is your objective. True. Whereas these are more vehicles towards taking actions. And so I can understand that like it's a little bit easier maybe to like baseline compare stuff.
Yeah.
But that being said, I've definitely looked at a handful of the cards in the game and been like, that feels really strong, but I don't have proof to say that it's overly strong. I'm not like skilled enough yet.
There could definitely be like grass is greener situations where you're like, my hand of cards is okay. And then like Anastasia plays a card and I'm like, are you joking? What does that card do?
Well,
but I think that's a feels thing, not necessarily an actual balance thing.
I think it's also like you said, Nick, it's the brilliance of the design. For the most part, the cards either cost $1, $2, or $3. There's a few, there's a 0, there's a 4, whatever. There's a few cards but like the really interesting part of this is that when you're thinking about multi-use cards, because like Jonathan said, these cards are multi-use in 4 different ways.
Yeah.
And one of the ways is discard them to get a movement, which is basically an energy, discard them to get a piece of data, or discard them to get some publicity. Like that ability to discard them is just as important as whatever you're playing them for, in addition to you tuck them and you get income, or you can use them to scan. I'm usually not a fan of multi-use cards. In fact, when we first sat down to play this, I was like, I don't that's the part I'm not going to like, because of that level of AP when I'm looking at these cards. How I hate that choice of like, what am I going to do? But as you're playing the game, you're naturally in positions where you are only making 4 income, 5 income, so that if you have a hand of 3 money cards, you're only going to play 1, maybe 2 of those. So it makes it a lot easier to be like, cool, I'm going to get rid of this card. Cool, I'm going to move this on. So I think that situationally you could come across a card that you're like, man, that's so good. But it really depends on when you get it. If you get it early on and you have the money to play it, or maybe it's only $1, but then when you have it and how much money you have and what you play with it, I think really matters. And so I think it's hard. It's a hard thing to say that any particular card is so imbalanced, because they all are exactly, and they're all designed to be easily discarded or easily played, which I think is just really, really smart here, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it is worth noting that you draw randomly from that big deck of cards a lot. So that is a bit of a warning. Some people don't like randomness in their big, heavy Euros, and sometimes you can pick and choose from a little card market, but this is definitely a game about, making lemonade out of lemons sometimes, when you just draw seemingly terrible things. But then occasionally, like I know in the game we just played earlier today, Anastasia was like, I guess I'm going to draw a card. I just need to have a data on it. It's probably not going to have a data.
My last action, to score 8 points.
And you got a data. And it was a really high moment, right?
It really was, but it speaks to that luck. And in a way, I didn't even like it because it was such a lucky moment. It was like the choice. Do you know what I mean? Like if you've watched any of the videos I try to share, like, when I like set a goal and I get it randomly from the deck, it usually elates me. But in this particular moment, I was almost like a little frustrated at the very end for it all to come down to whether or not this card happened to like have a data on the corner, and it did, and that was fantastic. But
fortunately, it didn't matter because Nick doubled my score.
Yeah, Nick crushed
had
us.
Like 60 more
but
points.
At that time, I didn't know that, right? But part of it speaks to what we're talking about, of like how tight this game is I wanted to have the data. I wanted to have played the game so well that I had maximized it without needing the luck to swing my way, right? And that just speaks to what this game does for my brain and what I enjoy about it. And it's like, I don't even care if I'm winning. I just care if I'm executing my things. And so, but yeah, so it's funny for, like you guys said, for such a strategic game, that how much luck can ultimately end up playing in it.
And, you could say the same thing about Arc Nova. That might be one of the reasons why that kind of comparison can sneak in.
You hit on something there, John, that I want to talk about. I want to talk about scoring in this game because I think it's a lot more interesting than it is in a lot of other games. Mm-hmm. But before diving into the stuff that I think is interesting, I also want to talk about, I think the games, particularly long games, that feel fun, even if you can tell that you're losing, have something where you're building something. And in this game, there's not really necessarily that like building like your zoo, like Arc Nova, or like kind of, building your little kingdom on the map. But because you're exploring, you're like dropping probes in different places, and then maybe like kind of finding, things from certain aliens and going places, traveling across the solar system. I do think that the game comes with a sense of accomplishment, even if your score is not terribly high. And I think that's something that makes the game stronger for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The scoring itself I want to talk about because I've talked to a friend who actually really disliked this, but I'm a big fan. The game rewards you for scoring points early. When you hit 25, 50, and 70 points, you claim your end game objectives. And this game kind of like doles out points everywhere for doing all sorts of different things. You could very reasonably hit those 25 points in the first round of the game if things kind of worked out really great. More likely the second, but even still, quite early in the game.
Yeah.
And it's a genuine race to get there. Who focuses more on getting sort of point rewards is then going to get to choose maybe their favorite end goal objective. And multiple people can take it, but your multiplier is higher for being the first person there. And so this leads to an interesting sort of like players have some autonomy in setting up what they want their end game scoring to be. And it's a huge chunk of your score. At the end of the game, your score is going to be like 200 or 250 or 300. And end game scoring is like somewhere between 50 and 100 points. So it matters quite a lot what you're choosing of these things. And you really need to work towards them for a powerful goal. And so it's on the one hand, it can feel, I think, to some people like it's rewarding someone who's already winning. You're first there, so you have the most points. So therefore, you get to choose the end game goal, and that's good for you. But the reason that I actually really like this is because if you're not scoring as many points, what you're probably getting is income. And so there's an inversion. And lots of games have this system. You can score points or you can get income but it's obvious. You should get income early, score points later, blah, blah, blah. This game, I think, does a really nice job of saying the rewards for getting points are actually really good for doing it early in this game. And so it's very, very viable to say, okay, well, my income's not that great, but hopefully I can make up for it by surging ahead early and then also having better end game scoring, even if my third, fourth, and fifth rounds of this game aren't going to be as good as the players who are just focusing on income. I like that tension.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, I mean, we just experienced that in the game we just played. I think I did pass 25 points in the first round. I mean, there was a point where I was maybe even 50 points ahead of you guys. Like, I mean, I really surged ahead. You were. And I had like so many points, I was like, and then I was joking. I was like, cool, now I'm just going to sit. I then just sat at like 79 points for another 2 rounds. But I had just racked up so many, and then, obviously was gaining more points in other ways as we went through. But then Nick, who at that point when I had 79 points, I think Nick had 18.
Yep.
Right. And then, by the end of the game, he had 276 and I had 218. So you can see, how far we came over the course of those 5 rounds. And so I agree with you, Nick. I really like that, because you can almost argue too that sure, you get better points by choosing your goals early, but it almost, if you go a little slower and maybe you get slightly less points, particularly in a 2-player game, you actually have the ability to see what you're going to be better at.
That's true.
By the time you get there, right? Because if you, like, going over 25 and having to pick my end game, I had to then decide what I thought I would score the most points on. And luckily, I then kind of twisted my game in that direction. But you want your end game points to reward you from what your cards and the board and all these things and the aliens are like naturally giving you. And so in some ways, actually waiting a little bit, sure, maybe you're going to score less points because you're the second on that goal, but you then got to pick the one that was going to give you the most points.
Yeah,
at the end.
That makes sense. Like, you're like, oh, I've already done this twice, cool, versus I'm going to get a pile of points if I manage to do this in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this game has a lot of that. So one of the aliens kind of plays into that. This game is sort of asking you to kind of set what you think you're going to do. And I actually think thematically it does that really well. For a game about searching for aliens, it's also invokes that publicity. If you really drill into the theme here, you can see where you're rewarded publicity for the different things you do and all of that. It has a bit of that idea of like, if you're going to set a goal and are you going to accomplish that goal? I think it it plays into that natural theming of if we really were searching for aliens, we'd be boasting different claims, we'd be doing different stuff, we'd be, getting publicity for our actions, all of that. I think there's a lot of subtle theming here that's really fun.
Yeah. So one thing that we haven't really talked about at all, and I know it's kind of a contentious thing a little bit online, is the other way that people interact, and that's this scanning, essentially, the signal placing.
Scanning.
Yeah, I talked about it briefly, that you can get these pink traces by looking to close star systems and whatnot. And the main way that you do this is a very expensive action. It's 2 energy and 1 money. Just, how could you even afford it? To scan. And it depends on where Earth is. And like you take a data and you put one of your little tokens down. And there are 8 little competitions. Essentially, you put that token down, and once all the data is gone from that 1/8 part of the night sky, whoever has the most tokens there is going to win that little competition, and they're the ones who get to put down a pink trace, which usually gets you points and awesome alien cards and various other effects depending on the aliens that it is. So you're trying to target where the Earth is, and the Earth is constantly rotating, as we said, for where you can actually put these things down. Lots of cards give you the opportunity to place your signals down as well, like, put 1 down in blue, or put 2 down in Kepler 22, like, just this one specific spot. So you're kind of working all these things together, and I think, A, this can rub people a little bit wrong, and B, this is not adjusted for player count at all. And I don't really want to throw it all at once, but this, I don't know, we got to talk about it, right?
Yeah, the main reason I like this game at more players, even though it becomes even more long, is because of the interaction that takes place with this scanning. With 2 players, it too often feels like it's like, well, I don't really want to scan there because then you're going to outscan me. And in case of a tie, it rewards the person that got in last. And so it feels really bad to kind of like set up in advance, and you kind of just like avoid each other, and it might end up and just you don't interact with this component of the game as much, or it doesn't feel as good. Whereas in a multiplayer game, the more people that you add, the more kind of like incidental stuff people are going to get along the way, and then someone's going to kind of push that, and all of a sudden it becomes very interesting. And so I think the scanning subsystem works just so much better with more people in the game. I wish that there was some neutral scanning or something when we had some fewer players. I think that would help support that strategy a little bit.
For what it's worth, when I played 2 players, and I played 2 players a few times, I actually just use a variant that essentially you just put 1 neutral token in every one of the 8 spots to make them a little bit smaller so that they're easier to complete. It's worked really well for me. That's, some people think house rules are sacrilege, but it's worked out well for us. But I guess not just the player count thing, it's like this is also the primary way where like swear words happen, right?
Well, yeah, it's when the planets move, when things move, it's very hard to control. Like, it's not as simple as just being like, show my hand of cards and just scan. It's like you scan based on your technology, you scan where Earth is, you scan behind where Earth is. Maybe you have a tech, you can scan the sectors next to Earth. Maybe you can discard a card. You discard a card from the card row and it has to be the right color. There's so many variables that when you talk about tension in this game, the amount of times I've just been sitting, waiting, being like, oh my God, I need to scan. And are we going to get to my turn? And is the variables going to change?
Is the Earth going to move? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's going to happen? I think that does make, it's where swear words can happen because it is the major point of interaction, right? Yeah. Like, I actually found it interesting playing tonight with the 3 of us, as opposed to the last several games I played 2-player, where I also used the variant that Jonathan was talking about with the 1 data. And I found myself really missing it because I was like,
they're
when
huge.
You play that way with 2 players,
6
not only
data.
that, in the normal game, the second person to scan a sector gets 2 points. Well, when you play with that, it's the first person. So there's like almost a reward to scan, right? You're like, oh, I want to start scanning. I want to start doing this. And
variant it where you put the neutral at the very first position?
Yeah. How do you do it?
Oh, we've played different variants. I put it at the very end.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, just so that it's smaller, but that it doesn't interact with the first, second player thing.
makes a lot more sense. Do it Jonathan's way, but my way is also fun.
As long as you're having fun, it's fine, right?
I mean, I think in our experience made it so that it almost encouraged you to open a new sector.
To jump
and so
in.
that's
Yeah, that makes
why,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
Jump in. I think either way works. It honestly maybe works a little too well because we scanned like crazy, maybe, because I don't know. That's the thing with a game like this where I have to admit this game, I feel like is overall tuned incredibly well. I'm sure there is a reason they left the data the way that it is, but it's worked out to encourage scanning and 2 players to play it with 1 less data in each sector. And honestly, even in our 3-player game, I kind of wish that we had just popped the data out just because I wanted more sectors to close. I wanted my scans to mean more. And I know that when you scan, you get that data, and that data you can go put on your computer, on your board, and that can give you stuff. And so there's all sorts of reasons, but I often find it like just so hard to close sectors. Even when I played 4 players, I felt the same way. So I don't know. I wish that it was just a little easier to close these sectors, maybe, or that maybe your pieces stayed behind. I don't know. I love this game. It's perfect the way it is. Don't change anything. But I do like my variant.
I think it's the whole concept of it is interesting, and also can throw people a little bit off because this is such a multiplayer solitaire vibing game with your hand and your puzzle and your resources, and like, okay, yeah, sure, the solar system can move, but that feels like a secondary thing. Like, oh, Nick did a thing to move the solar system. That messes my plan up. But Nick did not do it to mess up my plan. So you're like, okay, that's just a wrinkle in my puzzle. With the scanning, it's very frequently like, you got there. Okay, cool. I'm going to close it. And then the next person's like, oh, I can't believe it. I was going to do it on my next turn. And, it's a very direct point of interaction in a very indirect interaction game. And that can throw some people off. Like, when we're comparing it to Ark Nova, like, there is no this in Ark Nova.
No. Particularly if you take out the aggression guards.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say that I don't think that this is multiplayer solitaire at all. I think that aside like the scanning is obviously an interactive component, but like you're racing to go to certain planets or like
Agreed.
accomplish certain things, grab certain traces on the aliens and which one you go on, especially when both are available. So there could be some tension there.
That's true.
Of where you're competing. Several of the aliens have you directly comparing values to other players. There's sort of like an infamous negative alien that like cares about how much
I love that negative alien. We got to talk about
the
that.
like risky points. Even like if I go in orbit on a planet, it discounts for everyone the ability to land on that planet. So there's a very real aspect of kind of like drafting after someone, especially at the beginning of the game. So I think that the game features a lot of interactivity. And you're saying that Nick didn't use the technology to rotate the solar system to stop you, and I absolutely 100% do.
I feel like there's a meme in here somewhere where you're like,
I 100% did. Yeah. I mean, and if you're going to play this a lot and play it competitively, like you are going to do that. I mean, that you are going to try and mess with people. It's not that you're directly, it's just going to be like, cool, I can see that they're going to do that. I have the opportunity to do this action first. I think I'll do that to mess up the planets, or whatever else. Because sometimes the way the planets align, God, I love this game. Sometimes the way the planets align, you can just pop from Earth to Mars right on to, Jupiter. And you're like, wow. And doing that gets you a ton of publicity, and it's wild. And you don't want to leave that for other people.
Yeah. Like the super highway to Uranus. You're like, no.
Yeah. I agree with you, Nick. It's easy to say in a game where there's so much crunching and so much thinking about to say it's multiplayer solitaire, because you're like, but this is not that. There is a ton of racing. There is a ton of, and the game does a really good job of rewarding you for all of the ways that Nick pointed out, and other small ways, just taking your technology. First one off the stack, it's 2 points. Like just every little way that you can get little points here and there. And, it finds a really nice way of doing that. Also, it helps with decisions, right? Because in a game where there could just be a lot of even decisions, it does make it a little bit easier to choose, well, it just seems better to take the one that has 2 points on it, or it just seems better to go land on the planet where, I'm the first one, so I get a better benefit. And the game also, again, is interactive there too, right? Because if you land on a planet where someone already is, it's cheaper to land. So
Yeah.
I am totally with you.
And this might be a little bit of a factor in the game's length. Like, people messing up with your
100%.
plan or just
100%.
crunching through to see if you can make a plan that is defended against.
Yeah.
I know we've mentioned just a few times that this is a pretty long game, but to pick on that point a little bit more, if we're talking about variants, since you guys are just talking about your variant, if I was creating a variant for this game, I legitimately wonder if the players should start off a little bit richer and have the game go 4 rounds instead of 5 rounds. Because I've definitely
it's come
played
up a lot.
versions of this game where it feels like the alien aspect of the game has been like closed out by round 4. So round 5, essentially we're just like doing solar system exploring and like, collecting straight points from doing that, which like it's nice to do that. But I feel like the part of the game that feels the most exciting, which is like the aliens exploring, finding the traces. Like I have hit points, particularly in a 4-player game, where it's like, we filled these puppies up. Like, like there's nothing left to explore over here. And I think I like my games to have a little bit, I want them to end like just as I'm cresting the hill. Some people, if you really like that sense of like having, done a full completion, this does a little bit more of that full completion thing.
Yeah.
I am really torn on this because when I first played this game, after the first few plays, I felt exactly that way. I was like, cool, when is the Prelude expansion coming out? That's just gonna, skip you over the first round and we're just gonna kind of get into it, right? I still think I want that, though. The more that I have played the game, the more I have appreciated the depth of the 5 rounds. And a big reason for that is you entirely determine your income. So you get quite a bit when you start, and then the second round, if you haven't tucked any cards for your income, it's gonna hurt. Because unlike most games, like I played this game and I was playing with my dad, and we got to the second round, he's like, okay, I'm gonna draw cards. I'm like, no, unless you've added additional card income cards, you're not gonna like refill your hand up. You're not gonna, none of that. But that's the same thing for your energy. It's the same thing for your money. So what I'm trying to say here is that part of what the 5 rounds does is that in that first round, you can actually, feels like, do a lot. And then in the second round, oftentimes, depending on how you played it, it can be like, oh my, I'm very poor, or, whatever. It depends on how you're playing out your game. And so I kind of like the length for allowing you to have one of those rounds at some point, whether it's your second round or 4th round or whatever round, where you're like, okay, I only was able to do so much. Like, we're going to wait. I'm going to get my income and we're going to, kind of see what happens. And I think that's what's nice about having a nice long game. But I don't disagree with you, Nick, because I too have played it where the aliens sort of gas out and then you're like, cool, should I go land on moons? Like, what else should I do now? Because I'm just trying to piece out my points. And then also for a game that has taken however long it takes you, some of you, I'm sure, 60 minutes out there in the world just racing through. But after I've played it for 4 hours, and then in that 5th round, after you've done so much, you can get to a point where you're like, actually, I'm gassed. Like, there's literally nothing to do. And then you end up kind of ending on a little bit of a low after all of this stuff that you've done, this massive experience. And you're just like, cool, I have $2 and a card and I can't play it. I mean, my dad and I had an experience where he literally, we must have spent like 30 minutes just trying to come up with what he could do with the very limited resources that he had at the end. And like, that's just kind of the fun that we have. Like,
right.
and
it's a puzzle. It's a side quest.
It's a puzzle. Exactly. But that can happen, right? And maybe that doesn't happen if this game is 4 rounds and you do start with a little more research. I don't know. Something.
Yeah. I definitely played a game. I did not win this game, where the second round happened and I took a single turn. Did not feel good. I mean, I think I played an expensive card, and then I was done. I was like, oh, and I pass. All right, I'm gonna go make a sandwich. Again,
Yeah,
I
the
did not
end
win that
around
one, though.
clusters can be very real. I felt pretty guilty in this game that we had just played because the end of one of the rounds, I just like I had so much that I needed to do, and because I had sort of intentionally slow rolled my preceding round, I just had so many more actions than the other players. So the AP can come in like certainly on a certain turn, but I find that when you have these like gluts of actions is when it really can slow down the most, and you're like everyone's just waiting, there's just nothing to be done. And there's nothing for them to even like consider during that time, right? Like they literally are just waiting for you.
It reminded me a little bit of Wormspan. I think it was the last game I played where I felt that way, where like the pacing, individual players pacing in between rounds just doesn't quite sync up.
Off cycle, essentially.
Yeah. Which is cool for the scope of the game, but can lead to definitely like, okay, we've got like 10 minutes. You do your thing, or vice versa. I mean, I did the same thing. Yeah.
One thing that is integral to this game that we've just had, glancing blows with is technology. There are three different, like I said, three different resources, and one of them is publicity, and you pick it up in a whole bunch of ways, flying by comets, Jupiter, whatever. The primary thing you do with it is spend 6 of it to take a technology. There are 12 different technologies you can take, and you always have those 12. It's always the same exact 12. And you put it on your board, and it can really change things. Like, boom, now you can land on a moon, or now your computer is upgraded, and you get points when you run that data, and you can also get that precious money that you needed. And I think this is an interesting spot in the design where you have a gigantic deck of cards, like 200 cards or whatever, and then only 12 technologies, and always the same 12 technologies. They're little stacks of tokens, and you shuffle them up, so the benefit that you get is different. Like, you always get a little Benny, like 1 energy or 1 publicity when you take it. But I have noticed that, like, I take different paths through them. There's, I mentioned there's like 3 different areas to the game, like overall mechanisms, and the technologies are split into 3 different areas. There's the orange area, which is all about launching probes and moving probes really well and landing probes and that kind of thing. There's the pink area, which is all about scanning and making that expensive scan action we talked about a bunch more efficient. You get to do more stuff. And then the blue area, where you get to add little modules to your computer. And it's interesting how it hasn't really gotten stale for me after 8 plays.
I know.
I don't know.
So
what do you guys think?
I totally agree. I was just, as you were talking, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want them to be different. Like 10 plays in, and I'm like, I feel like I interact with them differently every time. I need different things from them every time. The fact that the backs are different is huge, because whatever the resource on the back is, that sometimes you're picking them just based on what that is, because that could be so huge for you in a moment. And so then whatever that is, then will further dictate what you do. Like they just haven't gotten old for me, at least not yet, just because I've always found interacting with them to be so unique to each play, or even when they weren't, I was then interacting with a different part of the game, and so it didn't really matter what they were doing for me. I just needed them to help.
Yeah, it feels probably good that they're static, because the deck of action cards is just so like variable that there's already enough to consider, that having some sort of baseline things I think is very helpful. I will say that when I learned this game, I felt that the hurdle of understanding the technologies and why you would care about them, to me, felt like the biggest learning hurdle in the game. And like, it's 4 of these 12 do basically the same thing and actually are very elegant, and is one of my favorite subsystems in the game. The computer, where you get your data, and essentially it just gives you another way to use your data to get resources. It's very simple, and another way to say, I don't need income to make sure I get the stuff that I need to do this game. So that's very nice. But the 4 for scan and the 4 for doing probe-based actions are all different exceptional rules that do something weird, and I don't think they're created very equally, and it's pretty tough to suss out what that looks like until you've played a bit. So it's a hurdle to learn, but I'm glad that it stays the same from game to game, because there is enough already that you're paying attention to that does change.
Yeah. It almost feels like part of extended setup for what your first technology is going to be. Everyone starts the game with 4 publicity, and you need 6 publicity to get a technology. So you're not quite there yet, but it's pretty easy to get the 2 publicity in that first round. And then, what technology you take. We just played a game. I did my worst. It was the worst game I've ever played of SETI after 8 games right before we do a podcast for it. But the starting technology that I took, I'm even calling it a starting technology. The technology that I chose, I did it for incredibly short-term reasons. It was like fly through asteroids a little bit better. And like, I wanted to get through this asteroid to Saturn in that one moment. And I regretted it the rest of the game. That could have been a scan thing to make scanning more important, and now maybe I lean into that more. I have played 8 times. I think at least 2 of the times I played, the first technology I've taken says you can land on moons. So certain planets in our actual solar system literally have moons, and they're kind of shown here on the board. And generally, when you land on a planet, you can only land on the planet. But if you have the moon tech, the moons are way better. Like, you go to Jupiter, there are 4 moons that you can access in this game, and they are incredible compared to landing on Jupiter itself. So I've played 2 full games where it was like the first thing I did was take the moon tech, and that's all. That was my game. I was just like, launch probes, send them at moons. Launch probes, send them at moons. Versus other times you take a first technology and you kind of forget about it because it wasn't really good. I don't know. Like you said, I do feel like they are kind of not necessarily created equal, at least as far as how they lean into your overall strategy.
It's so funny to me because one man's trash is another one's treasure, right?
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of goes back to the theme that we're talking about in this game, which is timing is everything. Do you want points early, or do you want income early? Do you want a better bonus that's going to push your game along, or do you want a better action that you're going to use more, right? Like, because the moon tech, way better to use more over the course of the game, but getting to launch that probe in the first round and spend that $2 on something else, massive. Or getting that 2 data and being able to, put that on your computer that lets you then tuck an income card before the second round.
At the right
massive,
moment,
right?
early.
Yeah.
It can be an inflection
And so
point.
it's just so interesting that when we have the same 12 texts combined between us, we've played this game, 25 times, and yet we all would evaluate them differently. And I don't even know which ones Nick thinks is the best, so it's just so interesting.
I like the data ones. They feel satisfying.
he likes the ones we didn't even mention, right? Which is like, which are
like
also good.
Resources.
And the thing though that's so interesting, which I will point out about the data ones, right, is we talked about this computer, but you can run your computer and complete it and find alien traces by only using 6 data. But if you put down the data tech, you could put down as much as 10 data. So you're actually running your computer less efficiently in terms of giving you the blue traces at the end, or resetting the row, if you will, but you're getting more stuff when you do it, but then you need twice as much data to run it. And so again, I find that to be such an interesting choice. So I totally agree with you, Nick. My first game, I was like, I'm all about the blue text. And then I was like, well, unless I know I'm going to have a way to get a lot of data, I want to be, I'm going to do something else. So it's just, they're all good. You're going to end up with several of each. I don't think you're going to fill your board, though you can. Like, it just depends on how hard you end up wanting to go.
There's 12 technologies. I think the most I've ever seen anyone do is like 7, maybe 8.
No, I had 9 tonight.
I think I've seen 9. Yeah.
Are you serious?
I
didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Holy cow! No wonder I lost.
Yeah, I had 9, and in fact, I filled my board before. I have.
Wow.
Really? All 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Maybe I'm lying. I have to go. Now I'm second guessing.
I could see
feel
it being
like I
possible
have.
if you have the cards that support it.
Also, I
everything.
guess if you focus really hard on that, and you have a couple cards that lean
if you have
into that.
cards that do it. Yeah, because cards also, it's the game with a huge deck of cards. Cards give you opportunities to do a lot of the things cheaper and better and in different ways.
Yeah. We haven't talked about aliens much since the beginning of this.
Since the beginning, yeah.
I do want to just briefly talk about them. Almost maybe as slight spoilers, but I do think it is interesting.
Skip ahead and we'll put a little marker when you can come back.
Yeah, and I do recommend, if you haven't played, to not read the aliens.
Yeah,
and
don't
just,
listen to this.
Legitimately explore them randomly as they come up. You
Yeah.
can, in your second play, not shuffle in the ones that you played in your first play or whatever. But finding them naturally is a bit more satisfying.
It is really.
So we said they're not particularly wacky, but they do bring in new like board game classic mechanics in a way, in different ways. Like one of them is like, surprise, there's a pick up and deliver mini game now. There is no pick up and deliver, and now there is because of this one particular alien.
A-tier alien. The Maskamites are fun. They add in something different in the game, and they are. I
Nick
really
loves
like
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They're my least favorite. Another like one man's trash is another one's treasure.
And then
Pick up
there's
and deliver, yeah.
another one that plays with the future, kind of, where you're constantly planning
Yep.
toward the future. You're essentially saying, I'm going to get this awesome benefit later once I get X number of points. How do I get these points now? And it kind of leans into the thing we talked about earlier about like getting points now versus leaning in later. There's another one.
B-tier alien, by the way.
B tier?
B-tier, yeah.
That's the one that only uses energy, right?
Yes.
It primarily uses energy, which is good. I like when the game. I like
that.
that when the game asks you to use more energy, because I think money is a little bit more powerful than energy is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that the risk reward of it, or I should say the cost benefit of it, is not the most interesting as far as I'm concerned.
But that one also I think depends on when it comes out. When that's the second alien, I think it's a little less impactful because that alien does a lot of income. That one particularly tucks stuff a lot more.
Yeah.
There's
I think it's really
the boring one
because it's so different. But yeah, which one?
The boring one.
Oh man, I played with this one so much that I just like I feel like it's just like it's
where it
drawn
essentially
to me.
it has like this tiny little competition thing to get the tiniest little bennies at certain moments, and it's fine.
We really should be like naming this. What is that one called?
It's the
What is this?
Anomalies.
Yes.
The anomalies.
The anomalies. Yeah. The time ones were the Centurions.
You know what I love about the anomalies though is they play into the rotation of the world.
Yeah.
And if everyone else is like, this one's boring and you're the only one interacting with them, and they do give quite a lot of points at the bottom. They really let you interact with the deck.
It adds up.
Like I've turned on the I can't even say them. I've come around to them because when it goes around and you're just like, oh my god, and I get this benefit just because Earth happened to point at me. It's I don't know. I get it.
Yeah.
They're boring, but they're fun.
Then there's my
B-tier alien. I agree that they're boring, but they're fun to. It's nice that it says don't just automatically take the best reward.
Yes.
Because being at the top, taking a less good reward means that you're going to get the income from them, unless someone decides that they're going to counteract you or whatever. And that tension I think is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there's my favorite alien, the Oumuamua. That's
your favorite, really?
This is my favorite. Yeah. I think maybe
Interesting.
partly thematically because I remember getting really excited when the actual Oumuamua flew through our solar system in like 2016 or 17 or whatnot. But this one it's like a new planet. Like it's essentially like you like snap a little Lego piece onto the board and it's now there, and you can orbit it and you can land on it, and it has this kind of fossil mini game. And I'll admit the fossil mini game isn't that interesting. I think just thematically, I think the Oumuamua is super cool, and I just get really pumped about it for some reason.
No, but the fossil thing is cool because you can get a lot of points if you collect the fossils and turn them in. I mean, it just really encourages you to play with the alien. I like this one.
Yeah.
And if you can land on the planet, there's a ton of data there and there's points. It does create a whole different layer to play with.
From a component gimmick point, I just like snapping it onto the board, and you're just like,
oh, absolutely.
Boop, okay, it's now entered.
New place to scan, yeah, totally.
Yeah, theme and board presence A, but mechanically I would say C. Because I don't think it adds a whole lot to the game. I don't like having this like third resource that I can only use to cash in for a whole bunch of points.
It's true.
This is how I feel about the probes with the Maskamites.
But the Maskamites can give resources or points. You get to choose.
It's true.
That's fair. Yeah, but if you have the anomalies, then you can just get the things that you already were getting.
True. It's true. And then there's there's the fifth one that I left to last for obvious reasons.
No, I am so ready.
Exogens,
I've been waiting
because I
for
knew
this
that you
moment.
had a lot to say. So I've only played with them once. And in fact, I didn't like them so much that I took them out of the shuffle in multiple games afterward because I just did not want them to pop up. So essentially, the way they work is when they arrive, you all get cards depending on various things, certain number of cards, and you will commit these cards at certain moments, and they are end-game goals, like do X, get Y. Like Y being a pile of points. Awesome. The problem is every card has a danger value on it that ranges from like 1 to 7 or something like that.
Yeah, a huge amount. Yeah.
And also when you send traces over to the exogens, that also is going to increase your danger value while giving you a bunch of stuff. But the cards don't give you stuff. The cards are only end game scoring type of things. And when the game is over, everyone counts up all their danger, and the person with the most danger loses 10% of their score. Or persons if there's a tie.
Or persons.
Which generally is going to average out to, in my experience, 20-ish points. Like if an average score is like 200, 210-ish, you're essentially thinking, is this card worth 21 points to me? Yes or no? Is it going to put me ahead or not? I will very briefly say the main reason I do not like them. Well, 2 reasons I don't like them. Then I'll shut up and you can talk about why they're great. The first reason is the first reason is the cards are boring. For the rest of the aliens, the cards do stuff. Like spend this thing, do this awesome thing. Like you flip over a Mascomite card and you're like, are you kidding me? Like $1 and I get to land and I get that bonus card. That's awesome. Or like all of the other aliens have just really like overpowered feeling cards, which is part of the fun. The exogen cards are just another end game thing that you're kind of working towards that might just blow up in your face. The other thing I just don't love is I'm not a fan of the question mark. You don't know how much danger other people have done. You put the cards face down. So it's like a big question mark. I mean, the one game that we played, I remember Anastasia ended, I think you had like 19 danger and Nick had 18, I believe.
Yep.
And I would have won that game if Nick had 19 because it would have been an unfriendly tie. You both would have lost 10% of your score. And I'm not bitter because I lost. It was just like in that moment, it almost felt like a die roll. Because of those hidden things. Anyway, that's my spiel about the exogens. Now you talk about them.
Well, okay. Thank you for setting that up so beautifully and referencing that game because what happened in that game and why I was so glad to try them again is that I did have 19 danger. I did lose 10% of my score, and I fell so hard on my face, like it was embarrassing.
You didn't even really score your cards, right?
No, it was just it was so bad. Like I didn't score any of my cards. I didn't get any points. I lost 10%. I mean, it was just face plant, like whatever. But to go back to something that Nick said at the beginning of this podcast about being glad that the aliens aren't super wacky, right? This one is wacky.
Is the wacky one.
It is the wacky one.
Yeah.
And I see why if I was playing Seti for the first time, I would not play with this one because it is the wacky one. It is
for first-time players,
It is because like you said, every other alien, you get cards. It benefits you for getting in on the traces early because if you're the ones who discover the alien, you're immediately going to get some free cards and that's going to boost your game and like all sorts of things. This does that, but what it does is just kind of create more goals for you to aim. It's like secret goals. I mean, to go back to the idea of like it introduces another Euro idea. It's like it's a secret goal, right? It doesn't give you a lot of immediate rewards within the cards. But what it does do is give you a ton of rewards on the board. And that's what ended up happening. I just played with my dad. We played 2 players. They came out and I was like, I'm going to go hardcore into this guy. Like, and again, I had said I fell on my face last time. I went hardcore into it. That was a terrible idea, but I committed. And this time I committed so hard. Not only did I commit to the cards that I was playing, but it also committed on the board. And when you really look closely at the alien board, there are so many points on that board. Oh my God. So every time I was getting a trace, I was getting 10, 15. Like I was just getting an insane amount of points.
Who cares about the 10%?
Because I was taking crazy danger, but also everyone was giving me a publicity, an energy, a money, or whatever. Like it was benefiting me massively. And my dad's mistake in that was that he just ignored it. And because he ignored it, it didn't put any pressure on me there was no competition.
It's like
I
50 danger, who cares?
Who cares? And I could just take all the good spots. So it's very, very interesting. So then my score in that game was so massive. I mean, like well, I don't know. Now we played with Nick. I don't know by comparison, but in the end, just like you said, I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to lose 30 points from this or 25 points from this. it doesn't matter. And I still won by a crazy amount of points. So now by that point was my 8th play of Seti, right? So I enjoyed it so much more. It was fun to have such a different thing to interact with. It does require everyone to focus on it in a different way. It changes the game a lot. So, I want to put that out there because I've heard a lot of stuff about this one being the worst alien and all this. It just makes the game a lot more interactive, and it just means you have to play it differently. And, for a game I played a bunch, it was nice to have something so different. But it is very polarizing, very wacky, and that's my spiel on the unnamed alien. What is it called?
Exogens.
I like how I was like, let's have names, and I can't name any of them.
B tier alien. I want them to be A tier.
Which one is an A tier for you?
The Maskomites.
That's it. The one I would give a C is the one you'd give an A.
B tier alien. I want them to be A tier aliens because, like I said, I wanted more wacky aliens in the game that do weird stuff, and this succeeds at that. But I agree with Jonathan's point 100% that the cards are boring, and so you are just going to them for rewards, and that's not terribly interesting. The part that is interesting is the fact that players are responsible for attending to each other and then doing a little bit of guessing and then sort of like drafting off of if someone's clearly just like, I'm going to take all the points, I'm going to take the negative 10%, then it's like, great, then I'm going to just aggressively get second place and going to like absolutely reap the rewards for that. Yeah. But if you're kind of playing a trick on me with like, maybe your face down card is worth 0, risk or 2 risk or something like that, I have to be kind of careful about how much I want to really push my luck there. And that tension is quite delicious. I think, though, the problem that prevents this from going to an A for me, despite the cards issue, even like, is that you could have a table that is so fearful of kind of like breaking the floodgates, as it were, that players just elect to not interact with this alien, and then there's basically just one alien in play, and that super sucks.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, it seems scary.
You don't have to be afraid of that anymore because I just told you how awesome it is when you're the only one going at it. So don't you worry. But you're totally right. And I need to give, I tried to give the Maskomites like a solid try tonight. I opened them up. I had 2 traces. I opened up all the aliens tonight. The guys did not help me at all.
What do you mean you tried to give them a solid try? You didn't pick up a single Maskomite.
I had 2 Maskomite cards. I tucked one and I ditched the other. No, that's not true. I did play one. Okay, here's the thing. Explain this to me. We're getting into the weeds here, guys. But for just a second. Moving in this game is so hard. It's not that hard, but like it costs energy. It's hard to move. I already have enough trouble moving my probes around. You want me to move this other thing? Earth could be on the other side of the universe.
Yeah,
I can't.
I went to Jupiter and waited for literally a turn, like a round and a half, not a turn, a round and a half until Mars came back to where I needed
Stress me out.
Yeah.
Stress me out.
That took 0 energy, just chilling at Jupiter. Yeah.
No, man. And you just, it's like, I that's my problem. I don't commit to the Maskomites. So, I need to commit, because they have good rewards. And the only interaction I've ever had with them in the several games I played with them is I've always seemed to get the card that like lets you just pick up the Maskomite
token
samples and just immediately reap the reward. Love that. Why have to deliver it when I could just do that?
True.
While we're in full on spoilers territory, I will say the non-sponsored playthrough that I put up on Getting Games, Matt did a brilliant Maskomite strategy in that game. If you want to see somebody just juggling Maskomites like crazy, I was like in awe of what he was doing in that game.
All right, everyone who went away, you can come back now. It's safe. No more spoilers.
So this was my favorite game from last year. I did a top 10 list, top 12 list, I think it was, and this one was number 1, which is kind of funny when you compare it to other games of very different weights and whatnot. But I really did love. And I do love the puzzle of the way it works in your hand. Like I said, I just played the worst game of this at 8 games in earlier tonight. I probably had the least fun in the game we just played, but it's not like, it doesn't mean like, oh, this game is bad. It's just like, okay, well, whatever. Like, it's not always 100% going to be like completely thrilling. The other 7 games have been very thrilling experiences because of all the things that we've said. Also, I'm just a huge sucker for sci-fi, like especially hard sci-fi type themes.
Yep.
And, you know, this leans really hard into that. One of my favorite movies ever is Contact, and that's literally about the SETI, you know.
Yes.
So you know, theme doesn't normally pull me that much in a game, but I think it pulls me here as well. Where did this one land for you, Anastasia? I know you were like deep sea and ever deep sea forever, and then this clobbered you.
You know, I feel so incredibly lucky that I have gotten to experience SETI and Endeavor Deep Sea in the last 3 months of my life. It's just been a gift to get to play both of these games, to go into this turn into heavy Euros, man. I have not played this deep of games. I've not spent this much time gaming with just the same games and the same in single sessions, the same length of game in a while, you know, and to Nick, you said it best earlier, like a great game, which is like, it doesn't matter if you're winning or losing or what you're doing. You're interacting, you're building something and you're creating something and you're executing it. That's what this game does for me. And it's funny because when I first played it, I remember thinking, oh, you know, that was really fun. That was a great game. I'm never going to need to own that. It's too big. It's too much. It's too whatever.
You had the Ark Nova experience that we all had.
I did.
Where we were like, well, I know it now, so I may as well play it again. Like, I've invested the time.
Yeah, exactly. Then we played it again, and it just kind of like, it just started creeping on me. I kept thinking about it. I was like, man, I really want to go back to that game. I really want to share that game. It just stayed in my brain. And, you know, I want to go back to something that we said, you know, we started talking about at the beginning of the podcast, how this game is both simple and complicated at the same time. And it's funny because I came across a Reddit post, forgive me this little tangent, but I came across a Reddit post earlier this week where someone had talked about how he and his sons or whatever wanted to get into gaming, and they bought SETI as like their first game, and they just couldn't understand it. It was a lot of really helpful comments of being like, hey man, like, you know, you got to try these other games to build up to this. And I think that's very true. But I did take this game. I was talking about my dad earlier, and he's going to get this little shot. Hi, Dad. Like, yeah, I promised him.
Hi, Dad. GG get wrecked in that game that I just told everyone about.
I knew this game. I was a little apprehensive because this was going to be the heaviest game we had ever played. But over the last couple of years, have been slowly getting my dad is a gamer, but getting introduced to modern board games has been a new thing for him. And I've been slowly, you know, playing different games with him, teaching him all the different mechanics, and he loves them, and he loves every new game. He's such a good sport. He'll play whatever I want to play. And I seriously love you, Dad. But I dropped this down and was like, hey, I really want to play this. We're going to do a podcast, and I want to do some research. Will you play it with me? And he was like, yeah. I taught it to him, and he got it. The theme really helps. The mechanics, pretty clear. Great player aid. Yeah, it took an hour to teach. That play took us like 5 hours to play, but he liked it so much that I went back 2 nights later and we played it again for 4 hours. But to be so engaged in a game, and to have a game that someone who hasn't played a ton of heavy games could still sit down and just love the crunch. And he just kept saying, man, this game, it's just so cool, and all of the things it does, and to get to share that experience and to just enjoy 5 hours eating takeout and playing games with my dad. It's just been an absolute joy, and it feels like one of those games that just has that ability, not unlike Ark Nova, to just really capture people just across the board, despite being a complex, heavyweight Euro. Yeah. So I hope that guy on Reddit, I hope he goes and plays a few other games and then comes back to it, because I think he's really going to enjoy it. But, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. SETI's a banger. The theme, like John said, it's fresh and feels really good. The way that all of the systems interlock with each other, the really novel solar system mechanism with the moving around makes me feel really clever. And there's just some really nice management of resources throughout this game. I know I'm a broken record in saying this. It is just a bit too long that this won't become a 100, play game for me, because It's just like impossible. And there are other games that I play that are the same length or longer, but there's something about this one that just, it feels a smidge more daunting. Even if it was released on like Board Game Arena, I know that I would need to like commit 100% effort to play the game. And when I play on Board Game Arena, I don't commit 100%, and I would just get frustrated because it really does require like all my brain power to be engaged. So it's a wonderful game. Honestly, I think this is my favorite game I've learned in the past year as well. Wouldn't be surprised if it was my top of 2024 if I made a list of things like that. Like, it really is just so good. But it is a behemoth, and that is gonna keep it just not in my rotation in a way that I kind of wish that I would be able to with this game.
That makes
Cut
sense.
to 1 year from now. It is on BGA, and we're all like, yeah, we can play it in 90 minutes. Arc Nova in an hour.
Would be nice.
We'll see. Well, for a long game, that was probably a long episode, but we had a ton of fun. We really enjoyed. Speaking of 5 hours, it's been 5.5 hours since we all sat down and played this puppy and worked it through.
Well past my bedtime.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging out with us. If you liked what you heard, if you have a comment, if you played it, if you've played it in less time than 4 hours and you want to make us feel bad about how long it takes us to play board games, please go to the YouTube channel and leave a comment and tell us. We love comments. We love reading your comments, and you can check that out on the Getting Games YouTube channel.
Links in the description.
Yep. And we'll be back. I don't know what's next, but we'll have something.
We
Figure it out
will.
soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.